Turn to 4 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Welcome everyone who is on our Zoom and on Facebook for joining us for our usual Thursday webinar. It's really special this week. I know I say that every week, but this one is. But before we go ahead and introduce our speakers, I want to start as we do with a little bit of a slightly modified since our 40th anniversary conference land acknowledgement. Crow Canyon Archaeological Center acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Dene, and Jicarilla Apache people on whose traditional homelands our campus sits. We worked with some of our advisory group members to add a little bit more of our thoughts and feelings into the land acknowledgement, and we used this at the conference. We wanted to say that we bring light into the darkness of memory that these lands, waters, wildlife, and her descendants hold as a result of policies of removal, genocide, and displacement. We hold the discipline of archaeology and anthropology, our institution, our professional colleagues, and organization accountable by taking a critical approach to our work that allows for difficult discourse and shifts our efforts to be inclusive, restorative, and just. We are grateful to all Indigenous people and support the preservation and protection of cultural traditions, ancestral connections, and sacred lands. Thank you to all of our Indigenous partners for all of your work with us over the last 40 years and the next 40 as well. Everybody on Zoom, if you have some questions during the presentations, please just put them in the Q&A instead of the chat. Just use the chat for chat, and we can get to your questions at the end. If Zoom is giving you a headache, we are live streaming on Facebook, and you'll be able to see this after the fact on our YouTube channel, along with every other webinar we have ever had. It's really an amazing archive. Next week's webinar, also incredibly special. Please join us to see a really amazing video and presentation from our longtime partner, Hopi scholar Lyle Belenqua. This is another one of those webinars that will make you cry. Actually, every time Lyle gives a webinar, I have a little trouble composing myself. So please join us next week as well. I really can't advocate for that enough. And it's been, we're pushing 3 weeks now since our 40th anniversary conference, and it was huge. It was spectacular. Thank you for everyone who joined us, and we were able to get to know you better. Thank you to everyone on this webinar, everyone who contributes to us for your incredible generosity. We cannot do this work without you. Thank you as we go into the dark part of the year. You keep us happy and light. All right, without further ado, I'm extremely honored and really excited to introduce this talk and introduce our participants. We have Dr. Elaine Franklin, who is a longtime mentor and influencer here at Crow Canyon over nearly the last 40 years. She is the director of the Keenan Fellows Program for Curriculum and Leadership Development at North Carolina State University. She was formerly the executive director of the North Carolina Center for the Advancement of Teaching. Prior to that, was the director for the Center for Mathematics and Science Education at Western Carolina University. She is a leader in the professional development of teachers across the state of North Carolina. And from the perspective of Crow Canyon, she was our director of education from 1997 to 2005. She led our education department, developed our educational programs and curricula, and published a guide for teachers called Windows into the Past that we were just talking before before we got started, that Becky and I were just meeting and looking at that book still. Her research on student learning helped build the case for the development of the Pueblo Learning Center on our campus. She has been active in archaeology and heritage education for more than 20 years and has published nationally and internationally on issues related to education about the human past. She maintains her scholarly interest in these areas, as well as in the area of human cognition and how people learn. We are incredibly grateful to have had Elaine form our programs here, and really grateful to have her come and reflect on this and where we're going. And as we connect the past, the present, and the future, we are incredibly honored to have one of our newer educators, John Ghahate from the Pueblos of Laguna and Zuni, and a member of the Turkey and Badger clans. He is an educator at Crow Canyon, and he works with students to develop accurate, credible, and respectful narratives of Southwest cultures. His diverse professional background includes being a healthcare practitioner, a public middle school and high school math and science educator, an athletic coach for the public school system, a journalist for a national talk radio program, and a community volunteer for a variety of community conscious organizations. Most recently, John served at the as a museum cultural educator at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center in Albuquerque, a Vietnam-era veteran. John received a number of community, military service-related, and professional commendations. He was also a fellow of the Kellogg National Leadership Foundation program and a lifelong resident of New Mexico and his tribal nations, and a father to 2 children. I can't tell you how excited we are to have had John join our education program. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Elaine and John. Oops. Stop share. Don't look at my messy screen. There you go.
All right. Thank you, Liz, for that wonderful introduction. And my bio was almost right. I actually retired from my position at NC State last year, so I'm now among the happily unemployed. So I think I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen right now. All right. Is that good, Taylor?
You're coming through clear.
All right, great. So a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I think, Dr. Susan Ryan contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in contributing a chapter to a book that she was putting together to celebrate the first 40 years of Crow Canyon. And the topic of my chapter being looking at the programming, of the educational programming over those 40 years. And I first want to just say kudos to Susan and thank her so much. It was an incredible job that she did in pulling that together. It's a wonderful book. I hope everybody has access to it. And I really appreciate being able to contribute a chapter to that volume. And so the presentation today is drawn off that chapter. So it's kind of a synopsis, a shortened version of that. But I also wanted to just to add that I haven't actually had a 40-year relationship with Crow Canyon. It's almost 40 years, but just a little bit of my own background to contextualize where I'm coming from in this presentation. So my first experience at Crow Canyon was in 1990. I attended a teacher's workshop that was directed by Meg Heath. A couple of years later, I was really fortunate to receive the Ian Thompson Fellowship for Educators. And then I found myself back in graduate school, and I did an internship at Crow Canyon. I think that was in 1994. And in 96, I did my dissertation research with Crow Canyon. And in 97, I got my dream job and became director of education there until beginning of 2006. And since that time, I have really enjoyed and had the pleasure of leading several NEH institutes for educators. And so I wanted to just share that because it's really from all of those roles that I was able to think about those 40 years of educational programming at Crow Canyon, and all of those roles really were important to informing what I'm going to talk about today. So with that out of the way, I will jump in. And what I hope to do in this presentation, as in the chapter that I wrote for the anniversary volume, is to highlight what I view as the essential elements in which Crow Canyon's education work was grounded over those 40 years and illustrate how that foundation shaped its educational activities. The words in the presentation title were carefully chosen to reflect what I believe were the fundamental characteristics of Crow Canyon's education work during the last 4 decades, with engagement being the key word. And I like to emphasize that outreach and engagement are not really the same thing. The two terms are often used interchangeably, but they differ in some pretty significant ways. And in the most basic sense, outreach is done for others, and engagement is done with others. Outreach generally occurs in one direction, with the organization offering out information, whereas engagement is a collaborative, relational process. Both are important, but regarding public impact, outreach and engagement are qualitatively and quantitatively different. And while Crow Canyon does conduct some outreach activities like this webinar, it is, I think, to its core, a publicly engaged institution. Also, as reflected in the title, I think it important to consider the work the center has conducted in heritage education through both a cognitive and an affective lens. From a cognitive perspective, I want to emphasize the educational practices that were informed by our knowledge of how people learn. And through the affective lens, I want to focus on the social, emotional, and the cultural aspects that enter into teaching and learning about the human past. So in thinking about the role that human learning theory has played in the development of Crow Canyon education programs, it should be no surprise that an educator played a significant role in the center's genesis. Dr. Edward F. Berger, a Denver area teacher, began bringing his students to Southwest Colorado in the 1960s and engaging them in authentic community-based learning, service learning projects. Archaeology and the study of past cultures became the core of these programs, as he felt that these studies can give us unique insights into our own lives and cultures. In 1972, Dr. Berger founded a nonprofit educational organization, and in 1974, he purchased 80 acres of land in Crow Canyon near Cortez, Colorado, to give that program a home. Dr. Berger's pedagogical approach seems to have been very heavily influenced by the work of educational philosopher John Dewey, who saw the coupling of experience and reflection as critical to learning. Dewey believed that the learner should be actively engaged in posing questions, investigating, experimenting, solving problems, and constructing meaning. By 1983, Berger's Crow Canyon School merged with Northwestern University's Center for American Archaeology and became known as the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. The merger lasted a few years, and Crow Canyon emerged from it as an independent, nonprofit organization. In 1986, the Bergers left the center, having established the educational frame that would inform teaching and learning going forward. I thought it important to also include the word hearts in the presentation title, because conceptualizing the past is as much an affective endeavor as an intellectual one. According to Barton and Lefstick in their book titled Teaching History for the Common Good, current scholarship on cognition recognizes the inseparable relationship of thought and feeling in cognitive development. Barton and Lefstick contend that care is the motivating force behind nearly all historical research, and it shapes our interest in its products. We attend to books, articles, documentaries, museums, and historic sites only because we care about what we find there. And I just wanted to point out in that the lower right-hand picture, the gentleman in the blue t-shirt is Dr. Berger, and the gentleman in the baseball cap is Dr. Ricky Lightfoot. In the early 2000s, educators at Crow Canyon made explicit a fundamental belief that characterizes the center's values. Everyone's history matters. This is as true for groups of people as it is for individuals. This phrase acknowledges that what we have been, where we've been, and what we've experienced are all factors in carving our path to the present. How we care or do not care about the past informs actions and reactions in the present. Everyone's history matters also recognizes that caring about the past is integral to how we go about studying it in the present and how we thoughtfully engage others in that study. So in the following slides, I want to showcase some of the key programmatic activities that reflect the center's commitment to thoughtfully engaging the hearts and minds of learners over the last 40 years. Since 1983, Crow Canyon has been a national forerunner in the practice of citizen science. As defined by the National Geographic Society, citizen science is the practice of public participation and collaboration in scientific research to increase scientific knowledge. Through citizen science, people share and contribute to data monitoring and collection programs. This definition well reflects the research partnership that Crow Canyon has held with members of the public. Tens of thousands of individuals have contributed to the center's ongoing research and into the ancestral Pueblo history of the Mesa Verde region. They've contributed through participation in excavation and survey, as well as through artifact analysis and classification. Instruction about the nature of archaeology and the nature of science in general were woven throughout Crow Canyon's programs over the last 4 decades. Participants were made aware of research questions and design, why a particular approach was selected, and they were informed about technologies involved in the research process. Some of the more sophisticated lessons that participants learned at Crow Canyon were of the big picture variety, and these may have been as informed by the setting as by the activities themselves. As people spent time in the arid environment and learned about village population sizes and subsistence patterns, their curiosity about things such as how ancestral Pueblo people survived and even thrived was reflected in the growing complexity of the questions they would ask. And as is the goal in inquiry instruction, many of these learners became intrinsically motivated to pursue further study. For a significant number of them, the desire was strong enough to bring them back to Crow Canyon again and again, sometimes as research alumni, sometimes as interns or volunteers, and sometimes as staff members or board members. In 1985, the first replica structure was built on the Crow Canyon campus. This was the Basket Maker 3 Pit House Learning Center, a partially underground building constructed of adobe, wooden posts, and brush or twigs. Meg Heath was the first education director at Crow Canyon, and it was under her leadership that the pit house was first constructed. But the pit house has undergone numerous rebuilds over the decades, often with newer strategies for extending the life of the building, but always with a commitment to stay true to the authentic look and feel of a 7th century AD house. The structure has served as a classroom to thousands of students who have visited the campus over the last 40 years. Their time spent in and around it involved learning about the lifestyles of people who would have lived in such houses, including subsistence, clothing, and technologies appropriate to the era. The educator guiding them through this exploration helped them develop their conceptual understanding through a series of thoughtful questions, such as, how would you build this house? The educator would also respond to the numerous student questions that were inevitably inspired by the pit house itself, like, what's the floor made of, and how did it get so hard? Since its inception, the pit house has been an important instructional tool for student groups. It was frequently part of a series of lessons that included a simulated excavation, a visit to Mesa Verde, and an inquiry lesson with replica artifact assemblages. These lessons were designed to build understanding around the cultural history and chronology of the region, as well as about archaeological research methods. In 1998, when I served as director of education at the center, we designed a research plan to investigate if and to what extent 4th and 5th grade students were meeting these learning objectives. We suspected that some time periods might be more firmly established in the students' minds than others, which is what we found, but it was not exactly in the way that we had expected. Results of the study pointed clearly to the fact that students were remembering far more about the basket maker period than any other. We'd anticipated that knowledge of the Pueblo III period might be the most prominent because of their visit to Mesa Verde with its impressive cliff dwellings, but instead, their illustrated timelines were much richer with details from the basket maker period. When they couldn't remember the kind of house associated with the time period, they simply drew a pit house. After a close analysis of the activities included in the curriculum, the explanation became apparent. The pit house was their only immersive experience, and its influence skewed their understanding. Given that knowledge of ancestral Pueblo cultural continuity and change was the cornerstone of the center's education curriculum, a case could be made for expanding the campus's immersive learning environments. Thus, in 2003, the Pueblo Learning Center was constructed. It was based on a 12th century AD site in Mesa Verde National Park, and like the Basket Maker Pit House, it was constructed with a commitment to the authentic look and feel of structures from the era. After the integration of the Pueblo Learning Center into the curriculum, we conducted a follow-up study in 2004 that indicated a far more balanced understanding of the time periods and of changes across time. Immersive environments are powerful teaching tools because of their ability to make multisensory impressions, which is one of the reasons that Crow Canyon places so much emphasis on authenticity. The more information that can be embedded in a particular source, the greater its power to shape conceptual understanding. So in that sense, one picture really is truly worth 1,000 words. And if that picture is incorrect or carries confusing information, faulty ideas can be formed that may be difficult to undo. And in a larger sense, the natural setting itself can be seen as an immersive learning environment. This can be said for all variety of programs at Crow Canyon or at any location where the past is studied in the place where it happened. The arid climate, the aroma of juniper and sage, and the color and the texture of sandstone are as much a part of the present as they were of the past, and they contributed to what learners were thinking and feeling about the history that they were studying. Over the last 40 years, experience has been integral to all programs at the center. But as John Dewey noted, we do not learn from experience. We learn from reflection on experience, which is the way educators always ended the lessons held in the two learning centers. As noted by one Crow Canyon educator, many of the students' comments reveal that they're in the process of comparing their own daily lives to those of the people that they're learning about and are on the verge of changing the way that they conceptualize life in other cultures in earlier times. If everyone's history matters, then the inclusion of members of descendant communities in the telling of those histories and in the research process itself are essential. For Crow Canyon, this has meant developing relationships with indigenous peoples of the region, including Dene, Ute, and especially the Pueblos of New Mexico and Arizona. In the 1990s, the center formalized these connections through the establishment of its first Native American advisory group, comprised of individuals who shared expert knowledge and insights on research and education issues and served as scholars on various programs both on and off campus. The consultations and collaborations that grew out of these relationships served to dramatically enrich Crow Canyon's work in countless ways, but the conversations weren't always easy. Complications came from several directions. Archaeological and indigenous approaches to understanding the past differ. The border between the sacred and the secular are often less defined in some indigenous cultures than in Western societies, and great diversity exists among indigenous peoples of the Southwest, even among the groups collectively referred to as Pueblo. There are numerous examples of how traditional Pueblo knowledge has informed the education work of Crow Canyon, but perhaps the most notable involved the construction of the Pueblo Learning Center, which, as I mentioned earlier, was modeled after Mesa Verde Site 499. Site 499 included a room block, tower, and a kiva. And in the interest of authenticity and conveying accurate details about Pueblo houses and communities in the 11th and 12th centuries, Crow Canyon originally considered incorporating all the architectural components, including the kiva. This was problematic from the perspective of the Pueblo advisors, as kivas continue to serve ceremonial functions today. The difficult conversations that transpired eventually led to the decision that a kiva would not be built, but that its absence would inspire a teachable moment. And this took the form of reflective discussions that engaged students in thinking about what was missing from the household layout and required them to make inferences about why there was no kiva. The lessons taught through the omission of the kiva might well have been more profound than any that could have been conveyed with its inclusion. The impact that collaboration with Pueblo advisors and other American Indian associates has had on Crow Canyon's programming is immeasurable. Their advice on educational content helped shape the center's curricula for all age groups and for both on and off-campus programs. Just as significant as their advice was their presence as instructors or co-instructors in numerous programs across the years. This multivocal approach added diversity and dimensions to the stories of the past and encouraged learners to engage in critical thought about culture, history, and what it means to be human across space and time. I began this presentation by saying I wanted to highlight some of the critical elements in which Crow Canyon's education work has been grounded over the past 40 years. And I think I've done a pretty fair job of identifying the essence of that work and key components. But before I close, I want to also acknowledge some elements of the program that have, in my mind, been essential to its success. First, we're professional educators who were passionate about the mission. Education is a specialized field of knowledge. It's both an art and a science. Crow Canyon's been fortunate to have engaged many wonderful educators over the years, and this slide just shows a few of those educators, both past and present. student-centered curriculum development. Curriculum development and redevelopment is an ongoing, iterative necessity of educating. It's as central to education as is the act of teaching. The field guide that's highlighted in this slide grew out of the recognition that students need a way of recording their experiences, and in doing so could deepen their learning. We as educators continually evaluate and revise curricula because it's got to meet the needs of students in the times in which they're living. Over the last 40 years, Crow Canyon educators have shared their work in numerous ways, including presentations at professional meetings, through the internet, and through print publication. Windows into the Past was published in 2000 and was inspired by the number of teachers who came to the campus and asked for help in developing lessons for their own classrooms. How Students Understand the Past was published in 2005, and it grew out of the research that I conducted at Crow Canyon for my dissertation. Windows is over 20 years old, and considering what I just said about keeping curriculum current, I'll suggest that it might be time to revise Windows or develop Windows 2.0. In terms of educational research, Crow Canyon is an ideal setting for investigating how students think and learn about history and culture. In a time when that kind of education seems to be threatened, I can think of no more relevant work. Amplifying the mission through teachers' voices. Of all the students who've experienced Crow Canyon programs, I can think of none more important than teachers. You've probably heard of the ripple effect, which refers to the continuing and spreading results of an event or an action. I first came to Crow Canyon for a teacher's workshop in 1990, and I can assure you that the ripple effect in education is real. And in the last 20 years, Crow Canyon has hosted 10 National Endowment for the Humanities Institute for Teachers and 4 NEH Landmarks of American History workshops. Collectively, these programs engage more than 500 teachers. The number of students impacted is beyond calculation, but it would easily be in the tens of thousands. Delivering a true synthesis of Crow Canyon's educational work over the last 40 years is a really difficult task. And what I presented here is in no way comprehensive. My primary goal has not been to show that the center's educational work was sound, but to show why it was sound. These programs prioritize depth of understanding, authentic engagement, and an ethic of respect over methods that might have been simpler or more expedient. A deep appreciation for the challenges presented in conceptualizing the past, and a dedication to engaging the hearts and the minds of learners are rooted in Crow Canyon's past, and I'm sure it will guide it forward as it embraces new ways to make the human past accessible and relevant. And before I stop sharing my screen, I just wanted to comment on this last slide. It's just such a wonderful memory for me. Photo was taken in the garden of Herman Nagoyo at Okeowinge. And the gentleman on the right is the late Herman Nagoyo. Beside him, of course, is Dr. Bill Leip. There's a slightly younger version of me. And beside me, my longtime friend and colleague, Margie Conley, who I worked with. She was a phenomenal educator at Crow Canyon for many years. So I just wanted to share that. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to you, John.
Well, Elaine, first of all, I want to thank you for such a wonderful presentation, and it brings a great many of the concepts of what Crow Canyon is trying to exemplify, connecting the past and then certainly the present and as well as the future. But to begin with, I would say Ghahate Hopa, that's my mother's language, my father's language. I would say Keshe Ho, and to respect and honor Mr. Goyle, I would say Bak Vivo. Those are the languages of the current Pueblo communities that exist. And Crow Canyon certainly works to bring culture, science, and community all together. But what's, I would say, evident of what you have done in the past and what the current staff of Crow Canyon do every single day is to ensure of how we're going to tell history. And you brought this up very, very nicely. I think you said it very well, that connected together is history and culture and everything that identifies us as human beings. And for those of us who are Pueblo, and certainly our surrounding neighbors, as Liz mentioned, our Dene Apache, Ute, and many other different human civilizations that existed in the Southwest, there has always been science in this region. Because to be a farmer, to grow crops, you use biology. To build multiple storage structures that you see at Mesa Verde and Chaco and many other sites that we can see the evidence of what human beings have done, that's called architectural physics. And we just recently, over the past several weeks ago, we witnessed, and all of us ooh and awed of the celestial event of the eclipse. But we now have another term for that. It's called astronomy. So there has always been science. It's just now we're incorporating those concepts of what the predecessors of those of us who are Pueblo did and sustained themselves as societies and human civilizations. That's what Crow Canyon works to do, certainly in the past, and then certainly with the new tools that we have, we get to do that. And it's such an exceptional opportunity to be a part of that as a staff member at Crow Canyon. Did you have something to would like to add to that, or perhaps maybe continue the discussion, Susan? I'm sorry, Liz.
I was just wondering. No, that was spectacular. John, or well, I feel like maybe I ought to moderate that back to Elaine before I jump in on that. As you know, Elaine, you had just mentioned about the idea that it might be time to update Windows, which we heartily agree with, and in fact, John and the team have been doing that. Kind of to tack back and forth between the origins and where we're going now. Elaine, what are your thoughts on kind of what John's observations, being an Indigenous educator coming into Crow Canyon at this point, and your thoughts on the curriculum updates that would be relevant at this time?
Well, it is such a big question, and I could probably talk a long time about that. It would
That was
be
the
fun,
idea.
it looked fun to brainstorm with folks at Crow Canyon. It's, I think for all of us, what happened in 2020 and following that, it was a disruptor. And I've worked, for many years in the field of education, and it was a disruptor, and all kinds of things came out of it. There certainly, teachers talk about learning lags and things like that, but we've become more, I think, adept at using other kinds of tools and becoming aware of how to use those. So I don't really have a good answer to that, but I think I can see how the teachers I work with across North Carolina and around the country are becoming so much more versatile in the tools that they are using to educate with. And I know that Crow Canyon is working on doing some of those same things, and the kind of reach that you can have and the kind of inclusion that you can have with those are wonderful. I am a totally true blue experiential education person, but I certainly am not opposed to using lots of technology. I use it all the time. I love it. I'm really eager to learn more about how Crow Canyon is using those tools for outreach, and how you can. I do think engagement is really it's at the heart of Crow Canyon. I think when I was there 2 or 3 weeks ago for that reunion and the celebration, I think that that just kind of exemplified how that's true. Even with the return of 4 high school field students from years ago, so it's definitely an engaging institution. So I'm going to stop talking and certainly just turn it back over to you and John, because I'm just curious to understand how those new tools that we all became much more aware of and much better at using because we had to. How that can be used going forward at Crow Canyon.
But let me just, if you don't mind, Liz, I'll just kind of add to what Elaine said. I think it began when you were describing the development of the Pueblo Learning Center, Elaine, that first of all, the sensitivity was there to, first of all, ask and inquire Pueblo elders and or Pueblo advisors, and then act upon their recommendations. That's, I think the crux of what Crow Canyon does, it not only listens, but then as some people have been mentioning, it's walking the walk. It's taking the recommendations, the emotions, and we could certainly put that into one word, respect, of why it's just not, you just don't build a kiva. Do you build it just because you can, or you build it because, or you don't build it because you respect the advice of Pueblo individuals? And so certainly building a block house that we get, you showed in your slides there, it certainly does give you that hand-on experience. So when students come to Crow Canyon, as you mentioned before, initially, if it was just solely the pit house, they have that connection. That's the limit of their expectations and their experience. But then when you throw in the progression from a pit house to a block house, now they see that evolution of what humans do, and that incorporates the experiential opportunity that you have. I myself certainly would, I would say I would be an experiential educator, but I think how I look at education is how I make things relevant to students so that they can perhaps maybe extend what they're learning in a classroom or the curricula that they're being exposed to, and then they make sure they can then extend it into how does it apply to me. In my classrooms, I used to have a sign on top of the board there. Every single day they would see it, and the words were, what does it mean to me? How does it apply to me that I learn about science and math and all the things that are incorporated, so that we understand that things just don't happen because they do. If I learn how to use a computer, a cell phone, or go to the internet, well, that's math right there. If I learn how to maybe use things that get me from place to place, like a car, well, that we think of that as chemistry. So there are things that we learn about science, much like Crow Canyon is doing, incorporating learning experiences such as the pit house and the block house, and the hands-on opportunities such as the Pueblo lifestyles and the different modules that we have. Now we have something unique, this opportunity, this digital opportunity that you and I are crossing across a country. We can use those kinds of tools to bring that experiential opportunity to students when they don't physically have the opportunity to come to Crow Canyon. So that's how I see what my colleagues at Crow Canyon do, and then all the other support staff who make digital opportunities available, because it's not just the educators per se. There's someone else doing all the stuff for us that makes us become or use the resources and tools that we have to. So I think all connected all together, Crow Canyon is that opportunity, like you said, that book you wrote. And so sure, certainly Windows 2.2 would be great, because we have new ideas. I mean, within the past 20 years, we've found out, science has confirmed with us that their previous hypotheses of how long human beings have been here has been thrown back another 20,000 years, 25,000 years, because science helps us understand that. Now we're incorporating those concepts so Native students can see how science is relevant for them, not just to pass a test or get out of high school. Science is really relevant to us so that we can become participants in whatever profession or career choice we choose.
Thank you, John. Maybe that's a good segue to taking it in the other direction. When we obviously have a lot of non-Native students who come and experience Indigenous culture for the first time. One of our longtime advisor and elder from Coche de Pueblo, Joseph Suina, has actually wrote in his chapter in the same book that Elaine and Becky have their chapter in, that we have a great responsibility as to how we portray, we represent, we discuss Indigenous history and culture, given that sometimes we're the first time a non-Indian person has had this experience. So kind of as you were talking about, John, relevance of science to Native people, what do you think, maybe talk a little bit about your experience with what how should we approach non-native students? What would we want them to go away with coming to Crow Canyon?
Well, I would say oftentimes what students, and not just young students, like students in schools, but maybe even any participant, adults who are lifelong learners, when they come to Crow Canyon or they come to the Southwest especially, what knowledge they have of their indigenous neighbors in whatever states they come from is oftentimes portrayed by Hollywood or TV or some book like The Last of the Mohicans that was written in the late 1800s. So that's their knowledge. And so oftentimes when they do come to Crow Canyon or the Southwest, it's like it's learning all over again as it applies to, and the reason why I say that is because sometimes in my previous position and the currently now, sometimes I've had questions like, well, what do Native Americans, how do we address you? Do you want to be American Indians? Do you want to be Native Americans? And so they're being exposed to a totally new concept for them as it applies to them. But I think as an educator, and my own personal opinion is that I would like someone who would like to know about Native Americans is that they are human societies. They exhibit many of the different kinds of constructs as it applies to any human society, especially as it transitions from a hunter-gatherer society to now an agrarian society, that science was integral into sustaining and maintaining those cultures. Many of my fellow colleagues at Canyon have had the opportunity to go to Chaco Culture National Historic Park. But when you go there today, oftentimes many individuals, as well as guests, will simply say it's kind of bleak, it's a desert. How could people live here, in 1,000 years ago? But they found a way to do it because they were problem solvers. They addressed an issue much like we do today. If we don't know how to do something, we figure out a way to do that. So by giving those indigenous civilizations the credit where credit is due, that they were able to solve problems, to feed a society, to have a societal structure that this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it together. And that for us to build multiple storage structures like the great houses at Chaco, at Mesa Verde, and many other places, that required a collective societal buy-in for them to exist. And so this was just not happenstance. These were real human beings, and those of us who are Pueblo and our neighbors, those are our descendants, our predecessors. Because they were there, we get to be here. And when we speak the languages, much like Dr. Swina said, that's the responsibility we have, that we continue this legacy of who Native people were. And Crow Canyon now has the responsibility of looking at what evidence exists, such as all of these sites there, and trying to decipher who these people were. What did they do? Why did they do that? And one of the things that we help students when they come to our experiential learning modules at Crow Canyon is to not simply go out looking for things. There's a sign on one of our laboratories that says, it's not what you find, it's what you find out. How the people lived, why they chose this area versus that area over there. So that's what I think we would like as Native people to help those who are exposed to Crow Canyon and perhaps the Four Corners region, as well as the entire Southwest, that legacy of who we are as human beings is still here, very much alive in our cultures.
That's fantastic, John. That communicating that unbroken link from the ancestors to the descendants and the unbroken qualities of resilience and ingenuity that have extreme relevance to the challenges of today. It was really, really well said. Elaine, I'd like to pivot a little bit from students to teachers. And as you just kind of touched on in your presentation, the NEH programs but teaching teachers just seems like it's so rich with the possibility of expanding the impact that we can have in the world to be able to grow the understanding of the real lived experience of Indigenous people, past, present, and future. Could you share a little bit in a little bit more detail about your experience working with teachers?
Some of that comes from myself being a teacher, and
Right.
my first
Perfect.
experience at Crow Canyon was to come to a teacher workshop. I was a teacher in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and had become pretty smitten with Southwestern archaeology, and wanted to find a place where I could deepen my own knowledge. I'd been to, parks and dug for all the information that I could find on my own. And I found out about Crow Canyon, and I can still remember that very first evening sitting on that lodge porch. There were 40 of us. And we didn't have an NEH grant to support us to come. We paid to come. And this was 1990. One of the things that really impacted me when I came to Crow Canyon as a teacher was that I recognized I was experiencing good teaching. And teachers will be very critical of that. I can tell you, after having conducted, many professional development programs for teachers, it's like trying to be a doctor for doctors, I guess. And you don't want to waste their time. It needs to be quality. They know what goes into creating an engaging lesson, and they want to be intellectually engaged and respected. This is something that kind of breaks my heart a lot, is that some of the programs that I've worked in, the response that, and I think also probably you have gotten this from the teachers, NEH teachers, is that they will say, I felt I was respected as a professional. I felt you treated me as a professional. And that's something I think certainly Crow Canyon has always done. But I believe that teachers are, my heart hurts when teachers don't have the autonomy to be able to have more input into what actually happens in their classroom. But I think that programs like the NEH programs that Crow Canyon has done such an incredible job with. It isn't just an experience that they have and then they go away. It lasts, and it impacts it may not be that very next year that you see much difference in their classroom or in what they're doing, because they need time. They need time to process it and work it out and think about how it's going to come back to their students. But I've experienced it, I've lived it, and I've seen it so many times. I've had so many teachers. I've kept Facebook pages with some of those NEH teachers. I can see what they do. And anytime that we can give teachers intellectually stimulating experiences that respect them, respect their professionalism, and help them build their content and their ability to bring that back to students, is just it's a good investment.
That makes me think about what you said about it can be hard to be a teacher teaching teachers. One of the hallmarks of the NEH programs and our teaching teacher programs has been that there have been Pueblo instructors on those programs, working with probably primarily non-native teachers, and it's one of our past, present, and future goals is to the best of our abilities have people learning about Native culture and history from descendants and from Native people. Can you speak a bit to the nuance from some of those programs where you experienced people learning?
Absolutely. And I it is without fail, that's probably the thing that will be the highlight. I've looked at so many of those evaluations from those NEH programs, and it's a real standout that this is what they will always highlight as being the number one thing that really impacted them and affected them. The expertise that's brought through, Native people. It's an experience that, as John had pointed out, a lot of students don't get that. A lot of teachers don't get that either. And it's powerful. It's absolutely powerful. And I'm so excited that Crow Canyon is able to employ more Indigenous people and as teachers at Crow Canyon.
That, kind of along those lines of the actions that we're taking, the shifts that we're making. John, I know one of your first tasks when you came on working with the education team is to review and read and look with your colleagues at all of our standard teaching modules, the things that we have been teaching since our inception, and then so many more modules that have been created since then. Would you share a little bit with us about what that was like for you, and maybe what are some of the standout things that maybe have maintained relevance, and the things that you would recommend be emphasized or added in as we go forward?
That's a great point. And I will say to that the one thing that Crow Canyon has allowed and encouraged me to contribute to what you have all been doing in the past, because like you mentioned earlier that I'm just kind of the new person on here to the Crow Canyon staff. But the one thing I think that I have always felt integral to what education is about to help a student understand is make sure our vocabulary and the terms we're using, we all understand those. And I always use the example of I teach algebra. I love to teach algebra. And if my students don't understand terms like exponents or variable or all the other terms that go along with the subject of algebra, then it's hard for a student to really understand perhaps maybe formulas or properties of how we're going to move toward becoming proficient in algebra. And so terminology is essential to how we as educators, and I think it's Elaine has blended all those things together. And when I looked at the Windows book about how vocabulary is part of it, but if we don't work or we don't take the time to ensure that vocabulary is understood, and so things like using I'll use just one example, ruins. Well, as it applies to those of us who are native and or Pueblo, to us, they're not ruins. They're structures. They're evidence of humans who problem solved, who figured out a way to build these structures. So I have helped my colleagues make sure that we are all on the same level with the same words that we use to make sure that we're kind of presenting students with a great opportunity. And what I've helped students, or what I've helped my fellow colleagues being part of Crow Canyon now, is to be mindful that the current day Pueblos of New Mexico and our Hopi neighbors and our neighbors down in northern Texas, is that these civilizations are still very relevant. Their ceremonies, the cultural attire, their thought process, most importantly, the languages are still very tied into who we are even today. We have a Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, who's from the Pueblo of Laguna, where I'm from, but nevertheless, she's still connected to that community. And so by bringing all of these things together, perhaps we as educators and individuals like Deb Haaland and other prominent Native individuals, we can be role models. And I hope I bring that to Crow Canyon as being a role model to not only just Native students, but really to any student who says or can understand that I need to know a little bit more. And what I don't know is sometimes can be holding me back. And so when I look at that as a educator, I see that responsibility that we're changing the things of what we teach to teachers as well as students. Because when I was a student in school, I never had a native educator. I did not know was not taught the things that I know now simply because I took the time to research that out. Now I have that knowledge. But through the NEH grants, through the kinds of opportunities that Crow Canyon has offered, we now can present that out. And one of the things we're doing is by a hands-on opportunity when students can't come to Crow Canyon, we have this thing called a mobile learning center, which is a actual van bus that we can take to students. And if you can't come to us, we will come to you. So in addition to things like this virtual opportunity, we have tools now. We're using those tools to help Crow Canyon accomplish the kinds of things that Elaine presented in its inception and the context of what Windows is all about. And so we might need to change that, or not change it, but modify it or enhance it. I guess I would use the word enhance to the construct of what Windows is about. So it's really, I'm really honored to have this kind of opportunity.
Thank you. That's a wonderful answer. And, you know, the phrase that you used in there, I think might find its way into some of our messaging, which is what you don't know holding you back, right? To have what a great way, you know, to say it. I mean, we talk about, you know, we don't know what we don't know, but yeah, is it holding you back? What you don't know? How do you know? How could your life and your experience be different? One of the things we're experiencing post COVID as the schools come back and work with us is the sophistication of some of the schools that are coming, that they actually are, the students are coming, fourth grade students are coming who have lectures in social justice, right? Who visit underserved communities, you know. So in a way, we're getting pushed by our own constituents to, you know, to up our game, because we're getting schooled, right, by the generation that has the kind of access to information, the internet, that we didn't have, right? You know, none of us learned in that way. So I think there's a wonderful push and pull happening between our responsibility and privilege of teaching students and teachers what they don't know that might change their hearts and minds. We're just about we just have a few more minutes left. We don't have any questions in the Q&A, I'm assuming, because everyone is rapt and listening. If you do have a question, go ahead and pop it in. And while we're waiting over the next couple of minutes, I have to ask Elaine, I know you're retired and everything. If you were to come out of retirement tomorrow and come back to Crow Canyon, what would be your fantasy? What would be your dream? What would be your sort of passion project that you would want to work on if Crow Canyon was your oyster?
Oh, what a question! What a question! You know, I think I mentioned one of them. I mean, I would like to see a revision or a new version of Windows, that it became a really useful tool for us. And as Becky and I were talking just before this, that it really was a team effort. I think it was important for our team that everybody had something they could contribute to that. And so I think as you form a new, you know, team of educators there at Crow Canyon, a project like that could be useful in so many ways. So I'm sure that everybody in that team has things that they could contribute to that. You know, from the conceptualizing it, you know, what it needs to look like, and then contributing their pieces to that. And yeah, we only had you know, print. We had internet back in the day, back in the dinosaur day. But it was, you know, it was not anything that a lot of teachers were using or had a lot of access to have published Windows on the internet. Wouldn't have just really been very useful. It wouldn't, our work wouldn't have been as valuable, I don't think, in that format. But now, boy, there are lots of options for things that you can do. There could be really fancy.
Yeah, absolutely. But all right, well, you know that we're like the Hotel California over here, Elaine. You can you can check out, but you can never really leave. We're just coming
Good
up.
response.
Yeah, that goes for you now too, John. So
Yeah. Well, let me just say it's been an honor to be a part of Crow Canyon, and really the education is nothing new to the human societies that lived here. To pass along the information that sustained them is still really relevant. And that's the challenge for Native communities as we look into the future, how we're going to make sure that our Native students have that knowledge, but at the same time, the knowledge of what we call science and math and all those things that allow Native students and other students as well, but predominantly as it applies to what my interest is to ensuring Native students have the best expectations for them to achieve and acquire all the opportunities that have them. And education is really it's probably been said many times, is the key, so that we now become participants and work toward making parity, having parity with all other members of society as it applies to our contributing to what history is of and who we are as human beings.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have been really blessed on this webinar to have had one of our first directors of education, now one of our newest educators, and in the background we have had Rebecca Hammond, who's been an educator for 25 years at Crow Canyon. Thank you, yes, Becky, for jumping on and saying hello. And I wanted to just acknowledge you and give you the opportunity if you had any thoughts as a longtime Indigenous educator here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, it's actually kind of amazing to actually, like, you know, see the windows into the past, you know, talk about, you know, the new changes that are happening, you know, looking at vocab and, you know, just talking, you know, to everybody about what things really mean and how, you know, things could be more indigenized, and, you know, being able to start thinking more in a native way about words and how a site what it means to us, and what, you know, what we're you know, what we're really, you know, wanting to say, and how, you know, it's not just this, you know, the archaeological site, but everything that is surrounding it is everything that is part of that structure, and how you know, we view everything. And, you know, it's kind of amazing just to be able to be a part of something that, you know, we worked on 20 years ago, Elaine, and then, you know, working with John and working with Rebecca and, you know, Jonas and Allie, and, you know, just being able to, you know, talk about terms and different things, and really finally it just feels good to actually be more inclusive and being able to share a part of our knowledge as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Oh, thank you, Becky. That's absolutely the perfect note to conclude on, is inclusivity. And as we've always said at Crow Canyon, everybody's history matters. We want to include multiple interpretations and use this as an opportunity to bring people together to find out what they don't know. So, right. Thank you so much to our speakers, and to Becky and Taylor, and we are just really honored for your hard work and your perspectives, and I'm really excited about the next 40 years, well, or at least part of them with all of you. So
certainly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Come and visit us at Crow Canyon.
Yes.
Thank you, Elaine.
Everybody, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Don't forget